And for me, it really has given me such a better context on like, why am I here? Why am I putting these hours? Why am I picking work at night versus like watching
Right.
TV with my friends?
Yeah.
I can see the direct impact it's having, and it's really heartening for me. It really like makes me feel more excited to wake up in the morning and go do what I do.
Welcome to another episode of the Growth League podcast. I am your host, Caleb Clark, and today I'm with my guest, Caitlin Cassidy, who is the Vice President of Marketing at Beyond. Beyond is an interesting platform. It's the #1 revenue management solution to help unlock new ways to make money with your vacation rental. So Caitlin has a unique ability, from what I've come to understand, to take sometimes complicated platforms or sometimes not complicated platforms, but regardless, weave them into compelling storylines that excite and engage customers, analysts, and media alike. Caitlin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, Caleb. I appreciate it.
You bet. Can you give us a bit of a high-level overview of your journey as a marketer and a marketing leader to where you are today at Beyond?
Yeah, it's funny. If I go back to the beginning of this career path, I couldn't have told you this is where I had ended up. Like if you had paid me $1 million, I never saw this. The one thread that has been consistent throughout my entire journey is a love of stories, and that's really propelled each step that I've taken. I started out in journalism. I had the impeccable timing to come out of college into a journalism career right as the economy was crashing in the late 2000s. So I had to make some quick pivots, and I was living in the Bay Area, and tech PR was one of the few places people were hiring. I'd met with some, folks from the PR world as a journalist. And I thought, why not? Like, let's try it out. And I fell in love with it, honestly. Like, tech just spoke to me in a way that breaking news hadn't. There's so many different formats that you can take, so many different interesting stories. And so with each step I've looked at, how can I tell better and different stories? So I went from tech PR agencies to doing in-house communications. And when I was at a company called Lattice Engines, we lost our content marketer, and I'd kind of plateaued in terms of where I could get as a communications leader just because of the size of the company. We didn't really need much more. And I raised my hand and I said, hey, like, I've always thought that the content side was like, could and should be better married with communications in order to tell more cohesive stories. What I had seen throughout my journey was that there was the PR communication story, and then there was like the content demand gen story.
Right.
And in the best companies, those worked really well together. And in the shittiest companies I worked at, like those were very disparate. And so I knew that was an area I was interested in learning more about and doing more with. And that was really kind of the linchpin that pushed me like fully into marketing itself. So I went on to lead content marketing roles, corporate marketing roles, where I oversaw analysts, media, and all of the like content brand marketing, partnered with some incredible demand gen and product marketers along the way as well. And then last summer, ended up in a position where the last company I was at got acquired, and I had an actual chance to step back and really think about what did I want to do next. And Beyond was a good fit for me. I'd been in marketing technology for a couple different roles at that point. And frankly, I knew I needed to switch. I wanted to try a new industry, but obviously be able to take all my learnings with me. And so I got to Beyond and fell in love with the people and the people who are our customers, and really have just kind of jumped into the VP role here, which is both thrilling and terrifying all at the same time to be leading it all myself in this role. But it's been a pretty incredible journey.
I'm going to come back to that statement about thrilling and terrifying in a second.
Okay.
For Beyond, what attracted you? What was so appealing? What problems do they solve for who, and why do you think they're well positioned for?
Yeah. As far as like, what about like the product and the customers attracted me is, they have incredible product fit. I'd been at my previous company, we'd really been like hustling to build and understand that product market fit. And while that can be a really exciting journey, it is a grind. And I'd been doing that for a while. And so I loved the Beyond. They had a sweet spot. They had a really significant problem that they're solving for their customers. And I knew I could jump in and start to make some pretty immediate impact. it's vacations, it's software for vacations. I get to like,
Love it.
from a brand marketing perspective, like the visuals are incredible. But it was more than that. It's the vacation rental industry as part of the broader like travel tech industry. It's a lot of, there's enterprise businesses there, but it's a lot more of like mom and pop shops, almost, I would call it. It's a lot of people who started with like 1 or 2 properties and built their way up. They've actually like, there are these entrepreneurs that maybe grew up in a like coastal beach town in the Florida Panhandle and saw an opportunity to manage vacation rentals and like live and breathe their community and like want to give back to it. And so I think for me, the thing that I thought I would like the most, and it has turned out to be true, is that working in marketing technology, I loved my customers, but they were like a tiny cog in these giant multi-billion-dollar organizations, the Microsofts of the world. And so when you help them move the needle business-wise, it's a small fraction, and it's really not doing, it may help that person do a better job, but it's not actually like life-changing for that person. Whereas with Beyond, we have some of these customer stories where they went from like, I started this as a side hustle and because I owned 1 property and I knew I wanted to rent it out, into like becoming like the manager of the association for vacation rentals in the area. Like it's these true like success stories, and they're real human beings, and they're putting money back into their community and only hiring local folks. And so for me, it was the first time working in tech where I actually felt like I was actually driving significant change in my customers' lives with tech, as opposed to helping a larger business like increase their bottom line by 2%.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, as we go in our careers, it's amazing how, money is money, a paycheck is a paycheck, but there's a thirst for something more, right? That we can kind of say, hey, I had a part in that, whatever.
Yeah. Especially with how much anyone in tech works, to be honest, especially like startups, like it's a pretty intense cycle that you can get yourself into. And for me, it really has given me such a better context on like, why am I here? Why am I putting these hours? Why am I picking work at night versus like watching TV with my friends?
Yeah.
I can see the direct impact it's having, and it's really heartening for me. It really like makes me feel more excited to wake up in the morning and go do what I do.
That's great. So if I'm a homeowner of a vacation, if I'm an owner of a vacation property, fundamentally, what capacity does Beyond offer for me? Like, how does it make my life a little bit easier? I'm a single property owner, or maybe multiple.
Yeah, I can start. I think it's a little bit easier to draw the story with a single is, if you inherit a family home that's in a beach town and you want to rent it out for vacations and be able to use it yourself, you would probably list it on something like Airbnb or Vrbo. But how do you know how much to charge per night? Like, how do you know when there's going to be an event in your beach town that you probably see really high demand and you could actually make more money per night on it?
Right.
How do you make sure that if it gets booked on Airbnb, that it's not offered on the same nights on Vrbo? So it's all of those like revenue management types of activities that we help automate for you. So it's really making sure you are priced, you are listed, your house is available for all those right things. And then we hook into a whole host of other systems that like professional property managers might use, property management software that really helps them understand like what listing is where, all of these different management capabilities. What Beyond really focuses on is that revenue part of it. Like, how can we simplify the actions that are going to help you make more money per night, per season, and make sure that your investment is actually that and not just like a money hole, and it's making you more efficient with it.
That's great. I love it. I know a lot. I used to live in Mexico in a kind of a place where there were so many of these, older folks that didn't really know what to do with. So I'd always help them like rent their place out. And I think this is perfect for them.
Yeah. And it's, you can do it on the side or it can be your full-time profession, but everybody needs help to be able to automate some of those systems. And that's what Beyond is there for. We have the platform itself, the algorithm that runs it, and we have a whole revenue management team that helps support our customers to make sure that they have the right strategy and pricing in place to be efficient and make more money.
That's awesome. So focus on Caitlin now.
Yeah.
In the role of VP of marketing, what is your favorite thing about playing that role? What's your most enjoyable component of that?
Um, the thing that I enjoy the most, honestly, is watching my team come together and build something great and something complicated and integrated. There's a lot of little things you can do in marketing, but for me, being able to sit with my team and come up with an idea of like, hey, this could help, launch a new product, or here's a creative way to tap into something, and then watching them all come together with these little pieces, and then we roll out a fully fleshed program that is multi-channel, that is multi-region, different audiences. Watching them come together and work together is the part that I have found the most joy in. As I said, like, this is my first VP role, so I was often the one collaborating with like other components of marketing in past roles and overseeing maybe just like the content or the storyline. And so for me to watch the team come together and really roll things out and achieve success, that's been the part that I've loved the most. Because I do come from that storytelling side. So
Yeah.
if you ask me what I enjoy doing the most, it's still like positioning and brand messaging. But from a VP perspective, watching the team come together is something that I have found an incredible amount of like passion to like do more of and help them continue to succeed and build.
Right. 8 months into it now, what's the most challenging part, or the part that scares you the most? You mentioned that before.
Yeah. The part that scares me the most, in all honesty, is that I come up on the storytelling comms brand side. My brain works in stories and words before it works in data sets. And so for me, my biggest fear, or call it imposter syndrome, as I've stepped into this role, has been that I won't be quick enough with the data, that I won't be able to see the patterns when I need to, or identify problems based on looking at various dashboards, audience reports, cohort reports, whatever it may be. So I think it was a little of me just having to get used to it, but also just having the confidence that just because I think in stories first doesn't mean I don't understand the data, and doesn't mean I hadn't been using data all along. It's more just now looking at the entire broad swath of all of these various data sets to understand, are we moving the needle with our marketing programs? Where can we improve? What is just falling flat on its face? We need to stop doing.
Yeah.
But that's been, in all honesty, my biggest challenge, is that I was deathly afraid that because I didn't come up in a demand gen role, that I wouldn't be able to hack it.
Well, thanks for sharing that. It's always tough to be vulnerable with those things. So I appreciate it. I mean, I see it very clearly, but I'm curious if you see it. At least I think I see it clearly. Do you not have an awesome opportunity to leverage storytelling through the lens of the data? Because that is often where data sets fall down, in my experience. But
I would completely agree. I think a lot of times people see the data and they're like, oh, but this is what it says. Whereas if you can just contextualize it for people a little bit and make them understand why this particular stat or data set is important, it really does unlock so much more. So it's funny you asked that, because that's where I came to actually. And something that helped me get over that initial fear was me finally voicing this to my boss. And she was like, we have a whole leadership team of people who think data first. Like, I think it
yeah, tap into them.
story first. Yeah. But I think data-driven storytelling is the wave of the future. You want people to understand that you have validated something, that it is based on real life facts. That said, we are still humans, and marketing is still a highly like psychologically driven profession. Is we have to tap into people's behaviors and their fears and their excitement. It's all that emotion is actually still what drives human beings' decision making. And so even in a B2B context, you still have to tell that story. You have to get them excited. And then that data is exactly what you back it up with once you've gotten the hook into them.
Yeah, I love it. People buy emotionally, they justify rationally. And so I think that's a great opportunity you have. If you can remember, if something comes to the surface for you, when you were asked to take on the role, it was at the beginning of your time, and the voices were starting to say, like, you've never been a VP before, you can't be. Can you think of anything that you relied on to help you kind of push through that that angry voice in your head?
Um, for me, it was recognizing that I was doing a lot of it anyway. Like I had done in various past roles, a lot of these components, I just hadn't stitched them all together at once. And so I think it was a little of me recognizing like, hey, you're being given this incredible opportunity, go after it. I also have a very tight-knit circle of friends that I started out my career with in PR, and we've all gone in various different directions, but we still stay very tight. And so I went and talked with them too and was like, hey, I think I want to do this. And basically I asked something along the lines of, am I an idiot? Am I going to fall flat on my face? And sometimes you do just need the people around you to pump you up and be like, no, you got this. Like, I will fall flat on my face at some point, and I've already made mistakes in this role, but it's reminding yourself that if you don't go after it, you'll never know what you could attain or achieve. And so I've pretty much led with that most of my career as I made some of these big hops of saying like, I'm going to get out of journalism and go into PR. I'm going to be honest, like I only understood a small subset of what a PR agency did at that point, but they were hiring and it sounded cooler than just staying in my like very, very entry level journalism job. And the same with like taking on content. I didn't understand how a lot of like business metrics worked at that point. Comms was pretty buffered from it. And so the first like 3 months of that role was also scary as shit for me as I, faked my way through meetings where they talked about lead generation. And I was like frantically Googling on the side, like what exactly that was. So.
Good for you though. Who cares? Like just go into it, know that you're going to have teammates around you, partners around you, and just, be bold and be strong, because I think that's what people are looking for in their leader. Right.
Yeah. And I think part of that too, and I was very lucky to come in and there was already a lot of team already in place at Beyond who are incredible, who I really love working with. Part of it as a leader is knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. I heard someone ask one time, like, what part of marketing did you grow up in? And I thought it was such an appropriate turn of phrase, because marketing does have so many distinct disciplines within it. You do really grow up in one area, but in order to be a leader, you need to have a low level understanding or awareness of how the rest of them work and how it should all work together. And so for me, where I've come to the last couple of months is recognizing I'm always going to be that brand marketer first, story driven first. And so I do hire folks that think more in data, and I make sure I surround myself with people who can help gut check that for me, because it's okay. None of us are going to be perfect in all those areas. Yeah. And so it's important to know what's your strength and not be threatened by someone else being better at a different area, but instead recognize if you work together, you're going to create a better outcome.
That's great. Yeah. What area of marketing did you grow up in? I think that's interesting. You don't think about it that way, but it is how you contextualize everything else through that, right? Mm-hmm. In your time there, have you been surprised by anything that has shown up as a bit of a superpower for you that wasn't as obvious before?
It's a great question.
Or a strength, or something that could turn into a superpower, or maybe it's something you've learned about yourself, but because of being in this opportunity.
Yeah. It's funny. I've always known that my superpower, and someone else, I can't take credit for this phrasing, even though I want to, because I'm a storyteller, but someone helped me articulate one day that my superpower was creating structure out of chaos, which is incredibly helpful in marketing because most of it, your data sets, your audience profiles, are pretty chaotic. And I think what has been accelerated for me at Beyond with that superpower is I was a bit surprised of how quickly I was able to get the rest of the team to rally around that. Organization is first and forefront in my mind, because if you don't know where all the pieces are moving in a marketing organization, you can end up with disparate campaigns, one audience set who's getting 3,000 emails a week or things like that, because there's no communication. And so creating the structure, I knew I was good at it in my personal life and a little bit in my professional life, but that for me, it's really come to the forefront of realizing like, damn, I am good at this, because I was able to take a marketing team that had been pretty rudderless for a while and get us to the point where we just had a massive product launch this quarter that was a net new product, broke ground in the industry. And we've moved the needle in a huge way. And for the fact that this team that 8 months ago was running like one-off programs, was a little, just like incredible workers, but like no real true North Star for everyone to come together against. That's been
That's awesome.
pretty awesome for me. Yeah. To realize where I was like, man, like I knew they were all really good at what they did. We just really needed to come together and figure out like, how do we organize ourselves so that when we move in one direction, we make so much more impact.
Has there been a feedback loop established where they're saying, hey, this is making my life quite a bit more enjoyable to operate in this environment?
It definitely has, which again it's just lovely to hear that like the way you're like helping run a team is working for them too. But I've definitely gotten great feedback where people want to feel like they're making an impact. It's why we all wake up in the day. You mentioned earlier, like money's money at some point, but we can all go make money at a job in different places in different ways. Like you want to feel like you're helping drive something forward, that you're part of something that matters. And when the whole marketing org, like when we all came together and really started to dig into like, what should we do this quarter to move the needle and how does everybody's piece fit into it? It was pretty great to see them be able to do it, but to also hear, to your point, that people were excited to be doing the work. They felt like they were valuable. They felt like they were better able to articulate to other parts of the company what they actually did,
Right. How is the team constructed right now? What does that look like?
Yeah. I would call it's almost broken into like process marketers and like content creators. I would call it. It's like we've got folks that are focused more on like demand gen promotional structure and looking at the metrics from that. Lifecycle marketing, thinking through like how does everything weave across in that journey that they have. Event management, we have a lot of like event logistics that happens as well. And so those folks kind of own their particular like sections of the marketing in terms of like what they're promoting, what they're running, what their outcomes need to be. And then we have content creators that layer across them. So like product marketing is helping support whatever campaigns need to be done. Again, with other content marketers who are maybe focused on more like top of funnel or like regional specific content. But that's really the way it's broken down now, because we have two different types of audiences. And one of whom is more of like a self-serve audience. And so it does require a lot of activity to go. And so we've tried a couple different ways, even just in the 8 months I've been here, of like, who owns what, how do things work together? And those are the swim lanes that we found made us the most efficient as a team.
Right. So from your perspective, since there's leaders in those different departmental areas, what do you rely on from a data set to, at a glance, understand, hey, we're going in the right direction or we got to turn around?
Yeah. I look at a couple different things. I actually I'm going to sound like such a nerd here. I actually just worked with our ops team and like got a better dashboard. Oh, it's so like, if I had my glasses on, it would be that much. But just getting a dashboard to understand at a high level, like how is inbound operating? How are all of our general marketing pipeline generated operating? And then looking at the breakdowns by like region, contracted, and then our hosts or like self-service segments. So at a big glance, that's what I look at, is like, are we on track to hit the right business numbers? Yes, no, great. And then with each of those leaders, we obviously have like a deeper level of metrics that maybe we don't roll up to the rest of the company, but from a marketing perspective, looking at like, hey, what's our ongoing for all of our inbound activities? Like, what's happening on the website? Like, are we increasing visitors, but are we also decreasing bounce rates while increasing time on page? So there's some of those like leading indicators that I'm always keeping an eye on with some of my heads, as well as like cohort analysis, like month over month, are we improving even slightly, like our payback periods? So for each of those different audiences, I have that deeper level metric, but at a first glance, it's really looking at like, hey, I know we've got these business metrics we need to hit this quarter. Where are we at based on where we're in the quarter?
So if you're fulfilling the business case, do you spend much time going deeper than that? Or do you go deeper if you're not hitting the business case?
The latter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not. Yeah. I definitely like going deeper is when we're off track.
Yeah.
Or for a couple, we've introduced a few new areas. Like we admittedly didn't have great lifecycle marketing previously. It just wasn't an area that had been invested in. And so that's an area I am going deep in right now because we don't have a lot of baseline for it. And so we're really trying to get a sense of, we think it's working, but why, And so it's like, we've got some leading indicators to just understand like, okay, are we in the right spot, the right cadence? And I'm feeling pretty good that probably within the next month, it'll be in a good spot where I can, again, kind of like lift myself up out of that level and just look at those bigger business metrics.
So with life cycle marketing, you're talking specifically about like a customer lifetime value growth of any individual and
Yeah.
nurture, I guess.
Yeah, nurturing them through. So it's looking at like activation. Life cycle is often our more of like our self-service or host audience. And so it's really looking at like activation, like how quickly are we activating them? How quickly are they hitting some key first metrics of like first booking, things like that. And then engagement. So like that mid life cycle journey of like, at what point did payback happen? Are they continuing to exhibit healthy behaviors? Like, how do we track that at a more aggregate level? And then for any churn that does happen, like how are we eliminating the churn numbers? Like how are we decreasing that so that we can continue to improve that lifetime value?
Right. Was the life cycle marketing challenge a challenge before you got there from best or so it's
it's continued to evolve. It was the host segment is a new one for Beyond or newer. And so it was just something that folks had kind of kept an eye on, like churn and like how long it took people to onboard. And that was about it.
Right.
And again, like anything that you roll out, there's always like blind spots of like, you didn't know until you didn't know what you needed to focus on. And so they rolled it out, they had the product ready. And then around the time I was starting, it was that recognition of like, hey, there's so much more untapped value here that we could be providing to this audience to keep them engaged, to make it stickier. How do we do that? And lifecycle marketing was kind of the first no-brainer of like, we just need to build a better journey for these folks and make sure that we can streamline it and automate it and then be able to experiment on it, which is where we're getting to now, which is really exciting.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. For your team internally, is there something that besides lifecycle marketing, is there something that represents like a big worthy challenge that you're all sinking your teeth into right now? You're excited to, maybe it's not solved yet and maybe you don't know how to solve it yet, but what is the elephant in the room right now? As much as you can share, of course.
Yeah. I think the part I can share is that we're at the tipping point that a lot of companies get to, that we broke ground on this market. Like we built the opportunity for there to be this like automated revenue management system for the industry. Like, it did not exist. No one had ever heard of dynamic pricing for vacation rentals. Like we started it. We are now at the point in a company where like, we're no longer emerging. There's no longer greenfield. People have never heard of us. Like we're an expected commodity for a lot of folks now. And so we're now hitting that tipping point of we're not the shiny new thing on the block. How do we continue to market ourselves and be innovative while recognizing there is more competition in the space now, not just direct competition, but just more noise from other tech vendors? Like, how do we still continue to maintain our positive brand value that we have, ensure that we're building features and functionalities to further support our customers while being innovative? And so that kind of like innovative brand piece is I would say like the elephant in the room right now of like, how do we keep this train rolling basically? Because we are at that potential plateau point that I think a lot of SaaS companies get to of like, we had early great success. How do we keep that going now that the market has been established and is noisier and it's a lot harder to get in front of a customer at this point, especially this year when the economy is weird. There's no other way to put it. Like no one knows exactly what's happening and it's not terrible, but everyone's a little concerned. And so making sure that we've built that brand perception and have those value props very solidly in front of people, like that, I feel like is the biggest challenge we're facing right now.
Yeah, you are a storyteller, because what I kind of envisioned was like, there was a phase of time where Beyond was kind of like creeping around in the dark. Nobody knew you were there. And then all of a sudden you're like there and they flip the light on. You're like, shit, we got to make sure we're doing what got us here, right? That's
Yeah.
cool. Without getting into any specifics as it relates to numbers, the art and the science of budgeting, how do you approach budgeting? So you come to a blank Excel sheet and a upcoming fiscal that hasn't happened yet, or a period of time, and just like, what is the mindset you put yourself in when it comes to allocating a budget?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's funny. One of the companies I worked at in the past was literally marketing budget software. And so I probably went from like the loosest marketing budgeting ever to being really hyper focused on understanding where every single dollar went. I've evened out somewhere in the middle now, but when I approach it, I look to start at two things. I do look at like, what are the buckets we invested in last year and what had great ROI, what returned what we thought it was going to. But then you also have to marry that with what are you trying to do next year? Because it may be different.
Right.
Like you may have been trying to like solidify against a competitor last year, whereas this year, you're opening up greenfield opportunity with a new product. And so I really try and look at those holistically to understand like, what am I trying to do this year and what channels do I know have worked in the past so that I can start to lay that down. I'm then a big proponent of like big buckets for big areas. Take events, for example. You probably know at a high level about how much sponsorships will cost, but there's so many other variables in there that may pop up. So I don't love to lock down every single dollar of a budget in the beginning, but I do think it's really important to allocate like, hey, we know we need to spend a quarter of our full budget on paid advertising. I'm not going to delineate exactly how much is like paid social, paid search, podcast advertising, etc.
Right.
But we know we need to invest X amount of dollars in order to hit the revenue goals that come from those paid channels.
Right.
So that's where I'm a big fan of like those like big rock opportunities first, is like get those buckets of money locked down, and you should have a working plan for approximately how much everything should go to. But I think trying to like sort out every nickel and dime before you even hit the year just sets you up for failure, because like when a good opportunity comes up, you should have the flexibility to run at it.
Totally.
We just had a different event, like a networking event opportunity pop up, and our industry is actually still very, I guess I would call it old school in the sense that like it is very people driven. And so like in-person events do tend to work incredibly well for us, whether it's like road shows with sales, trade shows, or just these kind of like networking opportunities through associations. It popped up and it was like 3 weeks away, but we knew it was like a great audience for us. And the fact that we could immediately look, like myself and my like events manager, it was like, we're good, great, go. Like I didn't even have to think about it. Like we know, like we had that chunk of money and we know the big stuff that's spent, but we also know what like our slush fund is, for lack of a better term. Say doesn't mean we spend it on whatever shit we want to. It means that like when the right opportunities come, we invest it there. And I'm always a big proponent of like hitting the end of the year where you've like maxed out what you have, because there's always that lever with marketing, right? Like you can say, hey, we're going to cut advertising spend, but you know that's going to cut growth too. And so I think if you've got the money, invest it wisely where you know it'll drive the biggest impact.
Yeah. I love the idea of bucketing in it, but not pinning it down, because if you pin it down and new opportunity comes, your confirmation bias disallows you from changing course. So, oh shit, I already budgeted. So that's interesting. Do you guys work with, you have an internal team? Do you work with external partners as well?
We do. Yeah. We have an external ad agency that we work with. And then we've got a couple different contractors we worked with for like PR opportunities in the past, because we have a lot of different regions. We found that works better than like one set agency.
Right.
We are lucky enough, we have design and like web development in-house. And so that's often something I've had to outsource in the past that we do have in-house at Beyond. Nice.
Then the reason why I asked that is because, have you identified or established an approach or I guess a playbook for facilitating the best possible marriage, the best possible relationship with external partners? What's worked for you? What's obvious red flag, and what's your, these types of things? Tell us about your approach.
Yeah. My approach is always that they should feel like an extension of the team. Like they should sit in as many meetings as possible. You should bring in guest speakers if you need to. Like, for example, like we had a product launch and it was like, I'm not just going to like relay some information to the ad agency. I'm going to have the head of the product that's launching come sit and talk to them about it, so they really understand the nuances of it, because that's going to help them create better copy and better storytelling themselves too.
Right.
And so I think if you treat them as if they are an internal member of your team, they then do feel that reciprocation of like, they have the knowledge to actually go run and create the best, outcomes. But they also have built that relationship with you then too. And coming up on the PR agency side, like I know which clients I went to bat for and worked harder for versus the ones where like I put in hours and I called it a day. And it's the ones that made the effort to make me feel like I was part of the team, not the hired help. And so I think I've always taken that approach with it too, is as much as you can build a partnership, that will help you work better with those like external resources. I think for me, the other big one is like when you see the red flags, when you know it's just not working, like just call it. I struggled with that with the PR agency I had in the past. I really liked my one contact, the primary, but it just wasn't working. And when I finally came to her, she was like, I've been struggling for a month to try and talk to you about this too. It's like, we both knew it just wasn't a good fit, but because we liked each other, we were really hesitant. And it was like, we should have cut ties then. Like I wasted basically 2 months of agency fees that I shouldn't have. And so that was a big learning for me.
Oh, that's super helpful. It's a topic that gets brought up a lot, and I don't think there's always easy answers to and direct answers to, but I have noticed over like 40 episodes now, a common denominator is like, pick up the phone and talk to them, like,
Yes.
or just like be a real person, I guess, right? And versus like this transactional agency client relationship where it's just like, it's team, right, at the end of the day. So
yeah, because again, like you've hired that agency or external resource to help you achieve a goal. So do that, like have that shared goal. And I do think having that mentality of like, we are working together to that shared goal, no matter like what your email alias looks like you are focused on that together. You are a team for that goal.
Yeah. When you, hopefully you're not thinking about beyond work, but when you do close your eyes maybe at night and think about it, like what is the opportunity, or what are some of the things that come into clarity for you when you look at beyond in 5 years or 3 years, or if it doesn't get quiet or something?
Yeah. For me, the excitement is like we've expanded into new audiences and new geographies in the last 2 years. And so what I'm excited about is that in North America in particular, it's what I mentioned a little bit before, where like we're established, we're not a nascent industry anymore. It's not greenfield. So the work there will look a little bit different than we have for some of the geographies where we're still breaking ground. And so the exciting part for me, what I'm looking forward to doing, is figuring out like, how do we carve that path or create that playbook, knowing what's happened in North America, to really accelerate some of our new geographies, knowing that we'll probably hit this point in 2 years from now. And same with our different audiences. We originally started with much more of like the professional property managers and this like post segment where it's usually a person who owns like 1 or 2 and it's their side hustle.
Right.
There's so much there's just like an amazing amount of creative work we can do there to get
totally
excited about it, get them learning about it. Like that's the kind of fun inbound type of machine to build that, again, like as a content storyteller person, I'm like, oh, I have so many ideas for this. So that's really for me, is looking at that as we have a great product. We have a great product team. We know where we're headed that direction. And so the exciting part for me is helping build, because again, like marketing was just a bit block and tackle before. And now I think like collectively as a team, we really have put some things in place where we can get more creative and be a bit more impactful because of it. So that to me is the opportunity for the next couple of years.
That's cool. I love when people use the analogy block and tackle, by the way, because I'm a football guy, so I appreciate that.
I would say half of my metaphors are about sports and the other about eating. Like food and sports is it's all I end up talking about.
Yeah. So tell me, I'm going to divert from where I'm going to ask a final question, but then like, who is Caitlin outside of this? Sports, food?
Yeah. Book lover. I'm an avid reader. I have a son who's obsessed with sports right now. So I'm like, went from being a tomboy to full sports mom.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. I don't know. I guess adventures is the best word for it. I like to be outside. I like to go see new things. I like to travel. I'm definitely one where there's like a great big world out there and I want to see and experience as much of it as I can. And I want to eat my way through all of those travel.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I plan most of my travel around the food and like the restaurants, and then the rest of the trip kind of comes in and around it. So
yes, I am very much that same kind of traveler.
that's cool. I feel like I could talk for 2 more hours about some of these things with you, but I'm gonna ask you one last question. I'm also gonna ask you after this one, is there anything you wish that I asked you? So
Okay.
Keep that in the back of your mind. But for this question, let's say that I'm somebody who is applying for a marketing role at Beyond, and I am fortunate enough to get hired. What can I expect from Caitlin as my boss, leader, supporter? Like, what can I expect from you?
Yeah. That's a really good question. You can expect a very like honest version of me. Like I've somewhere along the way, I just decided to be my whole self at work as opposed to having kind of like the work version and the personal version. So you get a lot of rawness of like, here's how I feel today. Here's what's going well. Here's what's not. I've never been told that I was like mean or anything, but I've definitely been told I'm blunt before. And so I think people know exactly where they stand when they work with me. I'm also one where like coming to work with me is one of those where like we get shit done and we have a really good time doing it. I always want to make sure that we check in as human beings because everyone can have a bad day personally. And at the end of the day, we sell business software. So if you need to go handle your life, you should go do that. But I want to enjoy myself. Like one of the other reasons I joined Beyond is I really liked the team. Like everyone I interviewed with was really funny and interesting and smart. And so I really love to make sure that when people come in and work for me, like it's going to be busy, but it's going to be entertaining and you're going to learn a lot too. Cause I love to bring people in. I never want to micromanage. I want to bring people in and help them learn what they need to learn. And then my favorite thing to do is to pass it off and be like, I don't want to have to deal with this anymore. I want someone else to own that and tell me when something's broken and then we'll fix it.
Yeah. That sounds great. I'll apply tomorrow. If I didn't have a baby born in like 20 minutes from now, probably. So
yeah, you should focus on that first.
What do you wish that I asked you?
Oh, I don't think I have anything that I wish you had asked.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, this flowed really well. Like you said, like we could probably keep talking for a really long time.
Yeah. Well, I found that if I get anywhere past the 8th question, it will be 2 hours. So it's either 8 or 20. So
so
it was really great spending some time with you. I learned quite a bit, and I think it's your journey and your experience should be very, very should build a lot of confidence in folks that are putting themselves in a brand new role, brand new company, brand new title. And then that's okay to have the voices telling you that you shouldn't be there and you shouldn't be doing those things, but find your 1 or 2 things or your 1 or 2 people to help sort of drown those noises out and then just enjoy the hell out of it. And I think that it was a really good example of that showing up in real life. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a great conversation. And if even one person can feel more comfortable about jumping into a scary new position after this, it'll have been more than worth the time. So
that's awesome. I will tell all of my old friends in Los Cabos to get onto Beyond, figure that out so they don't have to.
Please do.
Rely on me. Great to chat with you, Caitlin. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Caleb.